You can read this story at the Grayzone.
Let me pull up the headline. There it is.
Pull up the headline. I was trying to pull it up.
So the Grayzone caused the biggest PR fiasco in history for a U.S. government regime change arm, the National Endowment for Democracy. Leaked emails reveal. This is a scoop up at the Grayzone by Kit Clarenberg and Max Blumenthal. So Max, talk to us about this. How did the Grayzone stir destabilization at the destabilization entity of the U.S. government, the National Endowment for Democracy?
Yeah, I'll try to make this quick. Those of you who've been following the Grayzone closely know that we published audio of a phone conversation we had with Leslie Aun, who is the former VP of Communications for the National Endowment for Democracy, who just mysteriously reached out to Alex Rubinstein out of the blue, challenging him on his reference to the NED as a CIA cutout. And so we set up a call, and I proceeded, along with Alex, to educate her on the NED's longstanding ties with U.S. intelligence, how it was spun out of the CIA in order to do what the CIA did covertly in broad daylight. And we can see the fruits of the NED's efforts in Venezuela right now through the opposition, which is leading another regime change effort after the elections in Venezuela. I mean, they're seeking to topple any government that does not surrender to the U.S., to put it simply. So this lady has this disastrous phone conversation with us. We didn't know it until we obtained these leaked emails. This is Kit's scoop that showed that the outgoing leadership of the NED, which founded it, who are these neoconservative boomers, Carl Gershman, the founding director, dear leader of the NED, who resigned in 2021, were freaking out about this massive public relations gaffe that they walked into, and that Leslie Aun was actually encouraged to speak to us by the new upcoming leadership of the NED that replaced Gershman and the neocon boomers, who are like 40-something woke gentrifiers in DC who are obsessed with the LGBTQIA plus and BLM agenda. They're just heaping contempt on them. And through this email chain that we were able to review, we could see that one of the last neocon boomers, a pro-Israel character named Michael Allen at the NED, was driven out and humiliated by the progressive wokesters, the woke mob. And the NED descended into total crisis. Leslie Aun was fired. Michael Allen was fired. There were two major pieces of litigation against the NED over this fiasco, what they call the Grayzone fiasco. And according to Michael Allen, this was the biggest PR disaster in the NED's entire history. And we caused it thanks to your support. So it was very encouraging in a way to see that we had caused a crisis for an organization which has destabilized and caused violence in so many countries that just want to be left alone. But at the same time, I mean, what we're talking about here is a $200 million organization funded by U.S. taxpayers to meddle in other countries' elections with bipartisan support for Congress. Congress authorizes that budget every year. There's very little accountability, very little scrutiny, and you can see through these emails that we exposed that the leadership of this organization consists of idiots. They're not leaders in any way. They're incompetent. They're completely partisan to the Democratic Party agenda. So why are Republicans funding this organization? And this is a major story. I mean, this should be a huge story in DC, but the Beltway press, like Politico, which covers, water cooler gossip at low-level think tanks across the city, they won't touch this. It's almost like there's the US equivalent of the UK's D notice put on this story because nobody wants to touch US regime change policy or give credit to the Grayzone, we're totally blacklisted. So
Yeah.
how can you not report on this? How can they pretend this story isn't out there?
Well, the reason why is because the Grayzone is one of the few outlets that have been consistently reporting on the NED's actual role. So many other media outlets just buy into the cover story that this is just some, congressionally funded organization that wants to spread democracy. Not what it really is, which is to destabilize governments that are disobedient, as you said. And that's why, the NED, when it funds groups like Bellingcat, the U.S. media portrays Bellingcat as some independent organization and not an entity that's funded by a U.S. government regime change organization. And you can play that playbook over and over and over. And so because the Grayzone is one of the few outlets that actually does its job of reporting on the NED and what it does, it ends up, just by virtue of interacting with the NED, causing a massive destabilization crisis. And so that's why other outlets won't touch it. It's because they've gone along with the NED scam and the scam of so many other outlets that the NED funds or is associated with. For example, The Intercept still has a board member of an NED group on its board. This is a first, I think, in U.S. journalism history, where you have a U.S. media outlet having sitting on its board somebody who was tied to a U.S. government cutout that is dedicated to regime change. I'm talking about Maria Ressa, who is a founder of a Philippines news site called Rappler, but also is on the board of an NED tied organization. It's got some democracy type name. I forgot what it was. So basically, it's an NED group. So that's how normalized the NED is. And when I pointed this out to people who work at The Intercept, this was over a year ago, no one cared. They just accept that this regime change cutout can be involved in U.S. media and be a source and even a board member of other U.S. media groups. So by virtue of the Grayzone just sticking to the job of doing journalism, you guys end up causing this massive crisis. And the funniest part for me in these emails, I mean, it's really a funny article to read, but they're so livid at just the fact that this one NED member even spoke to you. And they say we should not speak to anybody who's critical of us. And they keep saying Blumenthal. We can't believe she spoke to Blumenthal. They're so upset. Even the act of speaking to you was an act of deep betrayal, and they're scrambling to contain the damage.
Yeah. And so Leslie Allen didn't know who I was, but the funny thing that we learned from these emails, this is the VP of communications for the National Endowment for Democracy. She didn't know what the National Endowment for Democracy was when she was hired. That's the thing. We were totally educating her about her new employer. She was just some Fortune 500 strategic communicator who was brought in by Damon Wilson, who is Carl Gershman's replacement, who is a former NSC color revolution coordinator for George W. Bush, and just brought in to carry out the biggest gaffe in their history. But it's all true what I was saying to her. I mean, the gaffe is that they actually just engage with the public. And that's what you can't do when you're in the think tank lanyard complex on K Street, is actually engage with the public that's literally funding you and paying your salary. Again.
Yeah. And this really is full circle for you, Max, because one of the first times I remember even hearing about the NED was, I believe, when you were reporting on Haiti, close to 20 years ago, and the coup there, and the NED's involvement in that. And so that's, we're talking about 2 decades ago, because the coup was in 2004. And those kinds of groups like the National Democratic Institute, things like that, which are all part of the same regime change U.S. government network. So it really is full circle. And outlets that used to report on the NED critically don't do that anymore. And so just the irony of one of the few outlets that actually does causing a meltdown is just very rich.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to take the Grayzone out, if you really want to stop us, instead of falsely claiming that we're funded by the axis of evil in the Washington Post, start actually doing real reporting, and then we'll become superfluous and we won't need to exist anymore. Start reporting on U.S. empire, start reporting on the NED, start telling Americans where their money's going.
Well, I mean, we are seeing some spin on that, where basically people are now willing to say what we say, as long as it's 5 months after we said it. So months after. So for example, when we challenged the Hamas rape scam, other people started doing that after we had already laid the groundwork for it. So that's one method to make us redundant, is to basically start saying what we're saying after we've already said it. I think that's one tactic that some people are trying, but
who knows? Maybe they'll report on Pierre Omidyar's ties to U.S. intelligence next. But don't count on it. Anyway, I'm glad we could get that out of the way. Huge credit to Kit Clarenberg. We got more to come at thegrayzone.com, more exclusive reporting.